Right, can you hear me, yeah? I've never used a mic before. So, morning everyone, and Happy New Year if I haven't already wished you a Happy New Year. For those that don't know you, my name's Mike Jarvis, as it says up there, and I'm married to Mike, who is now leading the church here in Glasgow. So this is our first time ever leading the church without any help. So please help us. We want your help. So anyway, a little bit about me. So I was born way back in the 60s, a long, long time ago, here in Glasgow. And for the first 4 years of my life, if you walk down this street and turn right, I lived on Brand Street. And I lived there until I was 4 years old. And then, probably as you can tell by the accent, my family moved down to the northeast of England. And so I was 4 years old. Before I left, I was christened Church of Scotland, and then off we went to England. And in the early days there, we were sent to church on a Sunday morning, and I used to go to Bible classes on a Wednesday evening. I don't really remember much about church, but I remember loving the Bible classes. It was really fun, and I learned all about Jesus, and I remember doing a Mother's Day card once for my mum, and and I really enjoyed it, and it was a great couple that led that ministry. But as you get older, different things, your friends want to go here and they want to go there. So I stopped going around about the age of about 10, 11, probably stopped going to church and going to Bible studies. I went into my teens and wondering, does God really exist? And I used to have these selfish prayers. Dear God, if you're there, show me that you're there, answer my prayers, and I'll believe in you forever. That kind of selfish, kind of prayer. But at the age of 17, I met someone that I thought was the love of my life, okay? And at the age of 18, we got engaged. At the age of 19, the cracks started appearing in the relationship. And first of all, he was unfaithful, and then I was unfaithful. And it broke the trust in the relationship. But we kind of trundled on. We kind of wanted, we kind of couldn't be apart, yet we couldn't be together. So we were kind of in and out of this relationship for a while, and there was a real kind of pull, and and it was quite challenging. Anyway, at the age of 21, he got someone else pregnant, so the end. And that was the end of that relationship, because there's one thing I wouldn't tolerate, is getting someone else pregnant. At least I got that far, So it was after that, I kind of, that's when I declared that I was an atheist. God didn't exist. If God existed, that relationship would have worked out. God could have made that relationship work out, So that was my reasoning. So I decided, right, I'm an atheist. I'm not going to believe in God. And I moved up to Edinburgh. So around about the age of 22, I was very successful in my IT career. I had a really good IT career. I had my own flat, my own car, went on holidays, wasn't short of a penny or two, and really lived life to the full. Went out a lot, socialized a lot, got drunk a lot, had a lot of relationships. But then around about the age of 25, I got into a more long-term relationship. So it was another 5-year relationship. And near the end of that relationship, I'd found out that he had been having an affair for 9 months with a married woman. So I was quite devastated by this whole thing, and it kind of left me feeling quite insecure, not good enough. All my friends were settling down, they were in relationships, and I wasn't. I felt unlovable. I felt that I was never going to be able to have a good and solid relationship with a man. And, so I suffered from anxiety, and I had mild depression. It affected my sleeping, and there'd be sometimes I'd be sat at work, working away, and suddenly the tears would just flow down my face, and I just at times could not control my own emotions. I got some counseling, and it kind of helped a bit with the breakup, but it didn't make me feel better about myself. So I still felt all these insecurities, all of these fears in my life. Then I actually became an IT contractor. So I was working down in Newcastle, and a friend there said to me, Marie, you should go on this course. It's called the Life Training Course. So I was like, I ummed and ahed, and then eventually I thought, right, I'll go on this course. Is this anybody's water? Can I? Right, it's just, I've had this cough since I was ill before Christmas. So, yeah. So anyway, so I was down in Newcastle. I went on this life training course. It was a whole weekend. And it was very interesting for me. What the biggest thing that I learned from that course was I didn't know how to forgive. And that's what was causing a lot of pain in my life. And so when I took the time to go, right, I forgive this person and I forgive that person, it just unburdened me. Like, I felt like free. I felt new. The anxiety just disappeared. The panic attacks I had just stopped. It was such a transformation. And the interesting thing about this course is, there was different. They actually brought elements of the Bible into it, which was quite interesting. There was at the beginning there was this thing about Eve and the serpent nipping her ear. You should do this. No, and a kind of another good conscience going, no, you should do that. No, you should do this. And it kind of really resonated with me. And at the end of the course, I thought, wow, I feel so good to feel this good. There must be a God. But where is he? I can't see him. I can't find him. I wasn't impressed with the religions of the world, although I did kind of think back to, the time when I went to the Bible classes and I was like, this Jesus character, maybe there's something in that. But where do I find him? I wasn't impressed with churches. I wasn't impressed with people who called themselves Christians. And so I was like, oh. And then I kind of moved back fully to Edinburgh. I was working as a contractor in Edinburgh. And one day I was walking down Princess Street, mind my own business, when this woman come up to me and said, excuse me, do you live in Edinburgh? And I was like, oh, she's English. She must be lost. Okay. Yeah, I live in Edinburgh. How can I help? And she's like, would you like to come to church? And I'm like, church? Church? Nah. And she was like, oh, do you have a belief? I said, oh, yeah, I believe there's a God, but church? Nah. So anyway, we got talking, and what we learnt from each other is we worked in the same company. So that time I was working for Standard Life, and so she said, oh, I'll get in contact with you through internal mail. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. We can meet up for coffee. So we started meeting up on a reasonably regular basis for coffee. And I was really impacted. I was really impacted by her love for God, her passion for Christ, and her commitment to her church. And I was like, wow, I've never met anyone like you before. Most of the people who call themselves Christians, they're kind of like boring and, they never talked to me about Jesus. They never had any passion about who Jesus was. And, I was really impacted by that. So eventually, after a few months, I said, I'll come along to church. So she was like, oh, okay. So I came along to church on the Sunday. And this is where it's quite interesting, Adam's communion today. So the first sermon I ever heard was on forgiveness, and so it was interesting hearing. I thought maybe it was Tim Dannett that did the first sermon I ever heard, and I thought maybe Adam's been speaking to Tim Dannett this weekend. And but anyway, I was very impacted. I thought, wow, that's what I think. They think the same way as I do, that forgiveness is a big thing here, and I was invited to study the Bible. So I started studying the Bible, and it just opened my mind. it was just phenomenal. So coming from an IT background, being a computer programmer, for me, logic was a big thing. Everything had to be logical. And what I really saw in the Bible, it was very logical. And I thought, wow, how can this be? And bit by bit, the cross just tore my heart apart, when we looked at that and, what Jesus had done for me so I could have forgiveness, me personally, have forgiveness, and it was as I was studying the Bible, that's the difference that I realized between, people who called themselves Christians and people who really were living the life of Christians. You could see the difference. There was a stark difference. And I was like, these people are really living this. It wasn't just that they were teaching me the Bible. They were actually putting it into practice in their lives. And as I started doing it, it transformed me. Like, it changed who I was. And I was like, wow, 3 weeks? So in August 1997, at the age of 32, I committed my life to Jesus. And what it did is it gave me hope. It gave me hope for a future that I thought I could never have. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." Transformation had still yet to come for me. I still had some transforming to do. I still thought a lot when I became a Christian in the way that the world thinks, and I had some transformation. And God definitely gave me some tests. So, I got invited out on dates from men out with the church on a number of occasions. But that was easy to say no to for me, because I knew that what I wanted to marry was someone who was a committed Christian. I didn't want to go back into the world. I'd had enough of the world. I'd had enough of the lies. I'd had enough of, unfaithful men. I did not want to go back there, But God sent a test. And so about a year after I became a Christian, this guy became a Christian. And he was the same age as me. He had an IT background. He was from Glasgow, and this was all in Edinburgh. He was from Glasgow. He was funny. He was caring. He was kind. He was sweet. He was all the things that I imagined a man should be in a relationship. However, he wasn't a strong Christian. And, as time went on, what I found was that I was getting too close to this guy, and I could see, like the Bible talks about not even being a hint of sexual immorality. Well, I could see that this was hard. This hint of sexual immorality was really hard for me, and it was a real test for me. And anyway, one day I received a letter from him, and I read the letter, and it was confessing his undying love. And I just thought, oh, this isn't for me. This is not the type of man I want to be with. I want someone who's focused on Christ first. That's what I want. And I really saw that. And so I actually backed away from the relationship. And I just decided, right, I'm just going to focus. I'm just going to, do all I can for God. And then I prayed, God, you show me the man that you want me to date and marry, because I am so rubbish at choosing men. So please choose him for me and show me, And by that time, Mike and I had known each other about 3 years. We'd been leading together. We had a singles group in Edinburgh, and our group really, really grew a lot. So we ended up leading 2 groups together. And over that time, we built a friendship together, and it was through that friendship that, God put Mike on my heart as maybe the person that, he did want me to date. The marriage thing was a bit like, oh, but maybe he wanted me to date this guy. So anyway, Mike did ask me to be his girlfriend, and I said yes. And here we are 21 years later. No, 22 years later. 22 and a half years later, here we are. and my journey, there's been ups and downs in my Christian life, but I'm really happy about the person God has molded me into. I'm really happy. I mean, I've got an amazing marriage. Like, when I look back at myself in my teens, 20s, and 30s, I had no chance. I had no chance of a long-term relationship. And yet, here I am 21 years later. Our daughter, Lorna, just went back to Cardiff to study again last night. Our son, Sam, is looking to go to university in September. So he's looking to do criminology, which is great. And God's really blessed our lives. And all these years, we've just been serving the church, loving people, encouraging people. And then now God has really called us into this position of actually leading the church. So thank you for listening. I hope that was helpful. And I hope God will bless your life as much as he's blessed mine.
Thank you very much, Marie. Let's just do a quick headset change. Excellent. Is it still switched on? No. Right, let's switch it back on.
Excellent. There we are. Good. Right, I hope you enjoyed that. I love listening to testimonies. I think it's so inspiring just to hear how God's worked in people's lives, how he's really helped them to become Christians. In fact, the very first, I'll briefly go back to when I became a Christian. It was in Sydney in 1995, and the very first time I went to church in this group of churches, there was no preacher. There was just 4 people standing up on a bandstand in a park, giving their testimony, telling how God had helped their lives, and it was so inspiring. It was really, really good. So this is one thing that I think, in terms of you've got the idea now, this idea of boasting in God, boasting in the Lord, that we're going to make as our theme for this year. What I'm hoping we're going to have is on the first Sunday of every month, and I know this isn't the first Sunday of the month, but never mind, to have somebody give a testimony. And to have one of the preachers give their idea of what it is to boast in the Lord. And I think we'll build that, and we'll be excited by just what we have in God. It'll remind us this fantastic things that we have in God, and it'll just inspire us to go and share it with people. And that's so important. I think that's so good. So let's do that. Have we got boasting in the Lord? Excellent. Right. Can I have the clicker, please? Have we got a clicker? Excellent. You've got it. There we are. So I'll do the clicking. Excellent. No, I'm not that great with it either, but I've got it set up on my notes, so hopefully that'll work. My title today is Boasting in the Lord, as you'll hear a bit more about through the year, and I'm going to talk about Jeremiah 9. The boasting in the Lord idea comes from a verse that I've been reading through 1 Corinthians, really just to get an idea of what church is meant to be. We often talk about the church in the book of Acts, and that's great. But in the book of Acts, it was very transitory. In the book of Acts, it starts off with being a kind of strange sect of Judaism that Jesus starts in Jerusalem. And by the end of the book of Acts, you've got a worldwide religion that's got presence in the capital, in Rome. And it's not what you call normative, what scholars would call normative. You can't say this is what they did in the book of Acts, so therefore this is what every church should do. But in 1 Corinthians, it really tells us a lot of the things that go wrong in the church, and a lot of how Paul tries to correct that, so we can understand what church is really meant to be. And I think that'll be exciting to go through that. We'll do some of that in our Sunday meetings, and some of them in midweeks, because some of them are a bit more nuanced and maybe more for the disciples. But the quote at the end of 1 Corinthians 1, where it says, "I will boast in the Lord," actually comes from Jeremiah. So we're going to look at that today in Jeremiah 9. Now, boasting is common. This is, you remember Dilbert? Dogbert's headhunting service. I've got a job that pays 100,000 per year and requires no skill whatsoever. Oh yeah, can I have that job? No, I didn't say it was available. I just called to brag about my own job. This is what we do. We like to boast, don't we? We like to boast about our jobs. We like to boast about, our families, our relationships, our homes, our all sorts of things. Don't want to brag or make anybody jealous, but I can still fit into the earrings I wore at high school. Anyway, there we are. Bragging. Check out this thing I accomplished. In your face, in your face. We like to boast. Look at what I did. It's so true. But Paul says in Corinthians we should boast in the Lord. And it's a much better thing to boast in. This is the end of 1 Corinthians 1. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things, the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus. And we appreciate Marie's testimony. It's because who has become for us wisdom from God. That is our righteousness, holiness, and redemption. Therefore, as it is written, let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. Let us boast in the Lord. Let's look at Jeremiah 9, because that's where that as it is written thing comes from. And it comes from Jeremiah 9. So the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah lived through siege and destruction of Jerusalem. And he prophesied to Israel. He was told to write down all his sermons on a scroll. And actually, if you read Jeremiah, you'll realize it's not in a particularly good order. And we surmise that that's because, as it says, the scroll was cut up and burnt. So Jeremiah had to go and write it all again from his memory. So it all kind of, ended up in the wrong order. And these are sermons of judgment on Israel's sin. Israel was into child sacrifice, idol worship, all sorts of things that God thought, no, this is not what I want my people to be doing. And God sent his people into Canaan to drive out the people that were doing all these things. But then eventually the Israelites started doing these things as well. And he got upset and said, no, this is not what's going to happen. Then he said there'll be a 70-year exile. There'll be hope for a renewal of the covenant. And there's kind of looking forward to Jesus and indeed eventual judgment on Babylon. But God never gives up, even though we indulge in Canaanite religion, and we may indeed do that ourselves, do things that God does not approve of at all. But here's the quote in Jeremiah 9. Oh, that's quite small, but there we are. Well, I'll read it to you. Some say that the quote in verse 23 answers a question that's in verse 12, and it's a little bit mixed up. Who is wise enough to understand this? Who's been instructed by the Lord and can explain it? Why has the land been ruined and laid waste like a desert that no one can cross? And here's the answer. This is what the Lord says. Let not the wise boast of their wisdom, or the strong boast of their strength, or the rich boast of their riches. But let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me, that I am the Lord, who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these I delight, declares the Lord. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will punish all who are circumcised only in the flesh. And we'll explain that a bit later on. Egypt, Judah, Edom, Ammon, Moab, and all these nations who live in the wilderness in distant places. For all these nations are really uncircumcised, and even the whole house of Israel is uncircumcised in heart. And it's saying that Israel's not really doing what it first started out to do. We'll talk a bit about the circumcision. Let me just look at verse 23. Because when I became a Christian, nobody said I was wise or logical or strong or anything really. I kind of thought I was many of these things, and I was praying with Marie one day a few weeks ago, and Marie said, I'm glad Mike's not like he used to be, arrogant and withdrawn and emotional, and and I'm going, oh, is that what I was then? Okay, but sometimes it's good to have somebody in our life that can tell us what it's really about, so that's fine. I definitely was not these things, and I was not in a position to boast about them. I was just emotional, but I appreciate Marie's sharing. But without God, we are self-centered. You know, we do like to talk about ourselves. We do like to talk about the things that make us, feel good about ourselves. Look at my achievement. Look what I've done. That's what we do. And yet this says, let us not do this. And if we can manage to not do this, then we are going to be different from the world as well. And that's, I think as Marie suggested, when people come to church, that's what they're looking for, is something a bit different from the world. Let's look in verse 24. There's destruction coming because the Israelites just boast of the wrong things. That's why they are subject to judgment and destruction. But verse 24, let the one who boasts, that red didn't work, did it? That's a good reason to open your Bible when I'm preaching, so that you can fill in the missing words that are on the screen there. Red on red, not a great thing. I'm not going to boast about that. Let the one who boasts about this, that they have the understanding to know me, that I am the Lord who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these I delight, declares the Lord. Kindness, justice, righteousness. How do we know? We want to be like God, and we have to boast that we have the understanding to know Him. And if you read the footnotes in the Bible on this one, it'll say that the word to know there is not just a kind of academic knowledge. It's an intimate knowledge. We want to know, have the understanding to really know God on an intimate level. And if you look in 2 Corinthians 3:18, it talks there as well. It says, and we all, with unveiled faces reflecting the glory of God, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another, which is from the Lord who is the Spirit. We are meant to be transformed into the likeness of Jesus. That is to the extent to which we're meant to know Him intimately. In Marie's testimony, a lot about just wanting to know, wanting to have intimate relationships, have understanding. And it's normal for us to boast about those who are close to us. So when God becomes close to us, we will start to boast about God. And yes, it's a kind of unrelatable thing to do because we live in a society where not too many people really are interested in God or want to know about God. But when we become intimate with God, we know Him, we realize that He rescues us from our tragedies, our problems, then we will start to naturally boast. Let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the knowledge to understand me, the understanding to know me. Kindness, justice, righteousness. That's what God has. And when you hear that God has kindness and justice and righteousness, do you believe that? Do you agree with that? Or do you have some kind of different understanding of God? Because if you listen to what the media say about God, then that's maybe not the understanding that you'll get. But when you become intimate with God and you start walking with God and you start being transformed into His likeness, actually you realize that kindness and justice and righteousness are actually characteristics of God. And I think the reason that we can know that is if we go through trials and storms with God. And then we'll realize that as He helps us through those things, that He is kind and just and righteous. I think there's definitely trials and storms in my life. I remember back in 2009, it was the year my dad died, and there was a team of us kind of leading the church at that point, and I'd said, hey, can I just come out of the leadership meetings for a bit just to get my head together? And actually what I didn't realize was that it happened was that I just got completely removed from that group altogether, and this was a church that I'd really been at the beginning of and help to start, and I really was passionate about doing it, and then I kind of suddenly wasn't in this leadership group anymore, and that was challenging. I felt like, really, what am I going to do with this? Like all my best friends were in that kind of team, and I thought, no, this is kind of taking away something that I am. And it was a bit of a storm in my life. But I had to decide what to do with it. Decide whether to harden my heart or soften my heart, to decide whether to really just carry on being a disciple or whether to get an attitude about that situation. And I did, and I tried to find people that came to church and study the Bible with them and help them to know what I knew. But through that I saw that God was kind and just and righteous. And that my relationship with God was not really affected by any particular status that I had in the church, or the way anybody treated me in the church. But the only way that you can know that is to weather these storms and know actually that God is there for you and is kind and just and righteous. You know, appreciate Francis sharing at the men's meeting this week as well about challenges he had with his student finances, and yet being very encouraged by God coming through for him, and actually just walking with God. So if we walk with God, we'll see that God is these things that I've written in blue there, has kindness, justice, and righteousness. So that's a key thing from Jeremiah 9:24 that we can have, and we must walk with him so that we can boast in him. Knowing God is an intimate thing. In 25, so it says, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will punish all who are circumcised only in the flesh. And this was, the circumcision was a way that the Jews could know that they were Jewish. They had, all the males in the Jewish religion had this process applied to them, and they knew that they had cast off what was unclean, that they were actually Jews. But God then says, but you're only like this in the flesh. This is only what you are physically. I want you to be this emotionally, spiritually, mentally as well. So he actually condemns those, in this sense, who have a superficial godliness. You know, I definitely had a superficial godliness in my past. Both my grandfathers were ministers in the Church of Scotland, so I grew up in the Church of Scotland, and I went from time to time as I was growing up. But there was a time when, I had mates in the Church of Scotland as well, and I remember going to this service of confirmation when a couple of my mates got confirmed as being members of the church, and then I remember going out afterwards and getting into the car and driving it around illegally without insurance. And I think we just went to church and then we, went and drove a car without insurance. And, it's not right. It's not right to have a superficial righteousness, but not actually allow people into your life to say, hey, are you actually being righteous? And this is why we disciple one another in the church. We say, hey, let me into your life. Let me know you, so that we can be set apart. And then verse 26 is similar as well. So he's condemning other nations for having being uncircumcised. But then he says even the whole house of Israel is uncircumcised in heart. We need to have that heart of being set apart. I appreciate Marie talking about forgiveness. I appreciate Adam talking about forgiveness. But this is one area that the world does not really participate in, that forgiveness. And if we are circumcised in heart, and it's great that we're under the new covenant that females get baptized in the same way that males do. We all have our own relationship with God. The relationship with God of the females does not depend on the males in their family. But we have this baptism. But is it a baptism of the heart, or just a baptism? Let's just make sure that we can forgive, that we can be set apart. So, we want to boast in the Lord. What do we do with this? Let me just sum up a few points where we can boast in the Lord. How do we boast in the Lord? It's always good, when we read the Bible, when we preach a sermon, whatever, to say, YBH, not GBH, not grievous bodily harm. YBH, yes, but how? How do we actually do that? So what I'm going to suggest is that we start with the heart. Yeah, we need to get conviction. We need to get conviction, and it needs to be in our heart. If we're going to boast in the Lord, where does boasting come from, really? Nobody Nobody will say, oh, I boast a lot. I'm going to go out there and boast a lot. But people do because it comes from the heart. It's in our heart anyway. We want people to think that we're maybe better than we are or better than they think we are. Or we want to boost our capital a little bit. So it just comes out the heart. We boast. Even the way I say things can be boastful, even though I don't mean it to. And I go, oops, I shouldn't have said it quite that way, but that revealed my heart. But, if we start with our heart, then we will be able to boast in the Lord. So let's get conviction that God's way is the only way. I think the testimonies help. It's great I'm looking forward to being able to hear a lot more of our testimonies within the church, how people became Christians. And that inspires us because it helps us to think, how other people are going to become Christians as well. That actually there are people out there who really desire this. And sometimes we can go out there and we talk to people. It was great going evangelizing this week with some of you guys. It was great meeting some people that were interested in wanting to stay in touch. But quite often we meet people who, no, I don't want that, don't want that, don't want that. But then if we hear from our own number that actually this really helped, that will help our hearts. It will help us have the heart to boast in the Lord. How's your Bible study as well? That's another thing that can help our hearts. If somebody at some point has given you one of these Deep Convictions books, very nice, shiny books, procured at great expense, have you read it? Because I know there's a few of us who have these books that haven't read them. But these are so good because they really help you to grow as a young Christian. And they really help you to just understand the basics in a good and helpful way. So do go through them and read them because that will help your heart. Satan does not want you to read that book because he knows that it will help you to grow strong as a Christian. Read your Bible. If you're an older Christian, read your Bible. If you've got a notebook, do you take notes as you read the Bible? Or do you just do it in your sleep in the morning? Even just taking a few notes can really help you focus. Even the next day, think, what did I read yesterday? Oh, let me go back to that and build upon that. Take some notes. So here's another thing. Starting with the heart. Let's definitely do that. And then let's be set apart. Because we need to be set apart as the world. If we don't want to have just that circumcision of the flesh but not of the heart, we actually want to be set apart. And if you come to church today and you haven't studied the Bible, then grab somebody and study the Bible because that will help you to get apart from a worldly life that is not helping you. As Christians, we're called to be set apart. Let's be set apart from the politics of the world. Politics is an absolute nonsense at the moment. Now, my old boss coined the term the perma-crisis. I'm wondering what the next episode of the perma-crisis is going to be because one doesn't finish before the next one starts, but it gives us loads of things to talk about and to get worried about. But let's be set apart. All the talk about sexuality and abortion and all these things, let's just be set apart from that and just focus on the Bible and what really helps people and invite people to church. Yeah, if you're, I appreciate what Marie's saying about sort of dating and different things like that, and our appreciation of that. But when we're choosing someone to date, we all want somebody godly. We always want somebody who can help us to get to heaven. And in the same way that if we're intimate with God, we want somebody that we can be intimate with. And what it says in 2 Corinthians 3 is that we will become more like God. And if we're with somebody, we'll become more like them. I become more like Marie. She becomes more like me. So we need to choose wisely about who we date. Do you date somebody who confesses their sin, who protects their heart, who is set apart, who gets input on their life from other people? When you struggle in your relationship, are you able to go to somebody who mentors your partner and say, hey, I need some help with this? Are you going to be able to do that? We need to be set apart. And that's so important. So let's start with the heart. Let's be set apart. And let's boast like you're betrothed. I think, it's funny because Marie sort of ends her testimony. I only asked Marie really to share about how she became a Christian. But what's her heart is She wanted to share about how she found somebody to spend her life with, and I think we all want that. That's fine. But that's what we like to boast about as well, isn't it? Let's boast like we're betrothed, boast like we're getting married, but boast about God in that way. 2 Corinthians 11:2 talks about marriage to God. God as our husband. Revelation 19 as the bride beautifully dressed for her husband coming down, and that's the view of the kingdom of heaven. But yeah, Marie's testimony always mentions me. But let's boast. Let's do things that excite us this year. And that's why I'm excited about putting together a plan. I know this month, I've got a plan for this year that I'll publish pretty soon once Chris tells me how to do it. I'm going to put it in a Google Calendar if he doesn't very soon. But never mind, to be boasting in the Lord. And to have every month have a brother stand up and say, this is what boasting in the Lord means to me. To have somebody come up and boast in the Lord about how God's changed their life. But meanwhile, do different plans every month. So what I'd like to do in January is boost our website. Get our website really, really working well. And we're doing that. That's exciting. Next month, I want to think about helping the poor. How we can really help the poor. Because Jesus does tell us to help the poor. That's important. In March, let's talk about how we can not just share our faith with random people that we meet, but how we can build new friendships. How we can use our talents. I go to the repair cafe sometimes, and it uses my talent. I've tried going to the chess club. I've tried going to the gym. I've tried going Scottish country dancing. I'm useless at all of those things, but just try it to build connections with people. Find something you're good at and that people respect you for, and then you can go and boast, and that'll be great. I'm excited about what the teens are doing this year. It's great having Craig and Candice put a plan together for the teens and really connecting our teens in. That's really exciting. Doing fun stuff. In the month of May, let's do a lot of fun things. Do things that we can boast. Go into work on a Monday morning and say, hey, what did you do this weekend? Well, I went parasailing. I went whitewater rafting. I went paintballing. Let's do some fun stuff. Other months, let's just work on our marriages, work on our prayer lives, different things that we can do. But at the end of the year, we'll really be able to boast in the Lord. And I'm so excited about this. And we'll see people becoming Christians. Let's boast like we're betrothed. Let's boast in the Lord. And I think, here's another cartoon I found. I'll read it to you in case the orange on red is not particularly good for you. Get somebody else to do the PowerPoints. The pressure to appear fabulous can make you sound like you're boasting. And she's saying, yeah, my vacation was fantastic. Thanks for asking. And the girl standing up is saying she had a fantastic vacation. She's imagining her holiday, slightly windy beach with leaves blowing around, and it's a bit cold. She's huddled up, getting cold, and she's saying it's great. And then the other woman's imagining her in a hot beach in the Bahamas with palm trees. And sometimes when we boast, we can put the wrong image in other people's minds. We can do that, and we need to be careful how we boast and do it in a relatable way and in a realistic way. But as we talk about this, I think we'll grow in that area. Yeah. And thinking about how it looks to other people. Thinking as we boast, think, how can I really help this person and love people as Jesus does? Most people don't go to church, so when you say, yeah, I went to church and it was like this, what do they actually think? When I was a bit younger, more people went to church. Fewer and fewer people go to church. So when you say, hey, can I invite you to church? I don't know what that actually puts in people's minds, but let's think about that. And yeah, let's work on it. But yeah, let's boast in the Lord, not because we are good, but because we walk with Jesus. Let's start with the heart. Let's have great quiet times. Let's really get our hearts in the right place. Let's be set apart. Let's be wise. Let's get advice. Let's look in the mirror, see how we look to other people, ask people how we look to other people. And let's boast like we're getting married. But let's boast like we're getting married to God, because we will be soon. Let's not be insecure. Let's be secure in God. And let's just boast in the Lord. Thank you very much. Hope that's been helpful.